Yo, what's going on, you guys? It's Johnny King with the Becoming Kings podcast, and I am here with Uriel or Uriel. How would you say it?
Depends who I'm speaking to. You said it great both times.
Yeah, right. I think I butchered it. Berrum, right?
That's right.
That's awesome. What do you prefer? The Spanish or the English version?
Well, I think my mom would prefer the Spanish, so Uriel.
Uriel. Yeah. I love it. But you are before I kind of get into your main kind of bio, so to speak, you are first generation American born to Mexican immigrants, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And we met, we had coffee, we kind of got into some awesome conversation. I was like, man, we got to get you on an episode of the podcast. But you're local here to Denver, which is amazing. We're gonna go kick it. Before we started recording here, I was just telling Uriel that I just bought a gravel bike. And for those of you that don't know, it's like rather than just riding your bike on the road, which is a road bike, or mountain biking, it's kind of, you're obviously riding your bike on gravel. And he's like, I just bought one too. So you're all things entrepreneurship. You've got you're co-founder of the Effect organization, right? It's kind of like the educational, what is it? Educational tech for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, no. So, we can get into it, but we started as a digital media agency helping impact-based organizations, but we're doing a pretty monumental pivot to education technology.
Educational technology. Okay, cool. I didn't fully follow that, but very, very cool. So we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. We're going to talk about maybe some of your childhood and what shaped you. We can talk about education and equality, climate change, voter access, a lot of the things that you and I've talked about before we start pressing record. And then I also want to talk about just all the stuff that we geeked out on when we met for coffee about your preparation for competing in Ironman races, which is pretty epic too. So
Totally.
Yeah, I love it. So you're here in Denver, obviously, like I said, right? And you're fresh meat. You've been here for how long?
No, recently, yes, but I'm actually a native. I was born here. As you mentioned earlier, my parents immigrated from Mexico,
right?
But I left for a while. I got a job in finance after college, and then I've been back since 2018.
2018. All right. So before COVID, obviously, before the world changed in many ways, but how's it been? You were gone for how long then?
I left in 2015, so 3 years.
Okay.
I was
and
gone.
Did you notice a lot change in those 3 years that you were gone, in terms of like population and real estate and development, or was it not long enough to notice?
I think I did, because I think in those 3 years that I was gone was actually the influx that we started to see, what we see now in Denver.
Yeah.
Young professionals coming in, healthcare, tech, and oil and gas moving into the city and getting jobs, and really building neighborhoods like Rhino. I think before I left, Rhino was not Rhino. It was still 5 Points.
Yeah.
And then I came back, and all of a sudden you have, endless breweries and places to go out and things to see, art on the walls. So I think so. I think it was the time.
Yeah. Because I moved here right in 2015, the end of 2015, when you were leaving. And I remember thinking, just in the first 3 to 5 years, I noticed a ton of change, and I heard a lot of locals, natives, I should say, which you are, is kind of like, man, so much has changed, much has changed, just in that amount of time. And I've been here long enough now, 7 years, that I can see, things have changed. But it's interesting how what I heard, and this maybe goes in line with a little bit of what your organization is about, in terms of just tech in general. But I understood, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I felt like they were attempting to establish Boulder, or at least the Denver area, as kind of like the next Silicon Valley, or like a very entrepreneurial place in the country, right? And does that have any effect, no pun intended, on what you're doing and the pivots you've been making? Or how did that kind of tell us a little bit more about your business and kind of why you're making the pivot that you are now?
Yeah, totally. So I think, to answer your first part, I think there's several places that are trying to establish themselves as the new Silicon Valley. I mean, you were just in Utah. We mentioned they have a little organization south of Salt Lake City called themselves Silicon Slopes. A lot of tech companies, Divi, a lot of other folks are down there. I think Austin's another place, and then Denver, of course. But to answer your more meaningful question, You could say they're a little bit related in terms of our pivot in the business, but really where we decided to actually move into education tech was through the existing work that we'd already been doing. So, we founded this organization to address some of the most meaningful issues that our society faces, and we
Mhm.
actually got our start significantly in working with political campaigns, ballot measures, candidates, and we were center left, mostly Democratic, only working with Democratic candidates, but working with
Mhm.
some ballot measures that were nonpartisan. And we've narrowed it down to, I think you mentioned it earlier, maybe before we were recording, climate change, education, public health, voter access.
Mhm.
Within the education space, we started working with charter schools and charter networks to help them with enrollment. Every single school, for the most part, that are under a public education system need to enroll students in order to
Mhm.
keep their doors open.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of their funding comes per pupil. So I found a need actually through one of my mentors who had started a school in Denver on helping them modernize their enrollment strategies into the new age, taking it from door knocking,
Hmm.
mailers to actual digital media and targeted ads. And then through that, you peel the layers even further. We
Yeah.
found an opportunity with software, with
Mhm.
technology. So
Mhm.
that's what I've been working on for the past 2 years. Is building a parent relationship management tool that schools, mostly, well, we're focusing on K through 12 public charter schools,
Mhm.
that would be able to use this software to manage all new leads for enrollment and manage relationships with parents to help them better convert the any interested parent into a converted student.
Hmm. So it's kind of like Salesforce for schools, kind
In
of.
a sense, yeah, it's like Salesforce, like HubSpot, some of these other Monday CRMs, but you're right, it's zoned in specific for the needs of schools.
Yeah, that's really cool. Which I imagine, m- maybe I'm probably being judgmental here. It's not necessarily always their strong suit, in terms of like enrollment, and it's like sales, right? Sales and marketing, and maybe they're focusing more on the actual education and with the children they have in enrollment versus trying to get and grow, right? So it
Yeah,
sounds like it's a cool tool to help them focus more on that. That's really cool. I didn't realize that you had moved in that direction, but that's pretty powerful. So in terms of um specifically talking about education inequality, how did you what is the vein that really kind of lit your fire, and whether it's you or your other co-founder, or was it the way that you were raised? What was it that made you want to focus on at least that little area of education?
yeah, no, that's a really profound question because I think it's all of the above in a sense. I think that when you do something that is meaningful, you have to definitely put your heart and soul into it, and you
Mhm.
have to be motivated by things like passion rather than profit. So, for my business partner, he was actually a teacher in the Mississippi Delta for a couple of years, and then
Mhm.
he went off to do a Fulbright scholarship to teach down in Colombia, and just saw firsthand educational inequalities in the
Mhm.
classroom. So, that kind of compelled his view on education. And then you have me, a first generation Mexican American, that really, the only reason that I'm here speaking with you or living the life that I'm living is because of education. I've
True.
had teachers and
Yeah.
mentors in my life that I feel like have taken a keen interest in me and my growth and
Mhm.
allowed me to see the value of education. And I look around now, I'm almost 30, and a lot of the classmates and friends that I had growing up didn't share the same fate as I did.
Mhm.
So I've always been asking myself, why is that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes it's beyond any school or any teacher or any classroom's control. But I do know that if there was a great equalizer, it's education. So
Mhm.
I think with all that said in mind, the main goal of what we're doing with this software is to ensure that every single kid that is deserving of a high quality education can get it.
Mhm.
So we want to offer this tool to schools and directors of enrollments and head of schools to be able to modernize their operations. So, like you said earlier, so they can focus on the good stuff, which is teaching these kids and preparing them for the next generation.
See, I love that. But you mentioned something, and I always kind of geek out on some of these things, these things as well. But yes, access. But then, what really was the line of demarcation that separated you from other kids that you grew up with side by side who had similar opportunities but didn't necessarily take advantage or didn't connect with them? What do you feel like is the difference maker for you and where you're sit today versus maybe some of those friends or, you know, kids that you went to school with that maybe aren't in as great of a situation as you are now?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's one of those like unsolvable problems, right? I'm not sure any one of us can give an answer that is like a definite response, but I do know that I've seen traits in some of the young folks that I mentor
Hmm.
that I feel like display similar qualities that I can see in myself when I reflect back in my life. And the word that comes to my mind is spark, right? I think every kid needs a spark, and sometimes it comes later in life. Sometimes it has to come multiple times, right? Just because you
Hmm.
get a spark once doesn't mean that's it. I feel
Hmm.
like you got to keep reigniting that fire. And for me, I think it was actually finding meaning in what I was doing. So, I'll be honest with you, I was not a good student growing up.
Me neither.
Yeah, so like there was just something about school that I just was not for. I maybe it was a apprehension to authority. Maybe I saw the schoolwork as meaningless,
Yeah.
but I think that kind of compelled some of my mentors to see that like it's not that this kid can apply himself, it's just that he won't apply himself. So,
Mhm.
actually the first school that we contracted with Effect was my high school math teacher who saw
Mhm.
that in me. And I mentioned, this earlier, he is now the founder of a charter network in Denver with 3 campuses. And he actually invited me to a college campus when I was in high school as a freshman, just
Mhm.
to expose me. And I think that ignited a spark in me to
Mhm.
see that school was never meant to be an ends. It was always meant to be a means for me. And I
Mhm.
realized that if I wanted to live a life of abundance and prosperity, I think I needed to meet these bare requirements. One day when I have children of my own, I think I'm going to require them to go to college and to do good in school, not because it's the end all be all, but because it's a means to a greater life. So I think that's what I realized. And I had now, when I realized that, I had now a greater reason to apply myself
Yeah.
rather than just completing a homework assignment.
Yeah.
Um, but I can't say I've met a lot of folks who have that mindset. That's actually a mindset that I like to encourage folks. It's like
Mhm.
taking a panoramic view of things, right? Asking
Mhm.
yourself why beyond the given why. Um, so hopefully that kind of gets to a mindset response as to
Mhm.
why things are the way they are. But like I
Mhm.
said, I'm not sure any one of us can give a definite response.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like of course, there are so many attributes. It's like how you're raised, the parenting, the mentorship, like you said, the support you have, um, financial means. There's so many different things, right?
Right.
And so when it relates to mindset, that's really what I was curious about, because whether we're talking about being a little guy in school or being an adult, at work, a lot of times the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and how we lived our lives when we were little is kind of how we live our lives as adults. And how do we, because I obviously work with a lot of guys who oftentimes do feel kind of lost, or unmotivated, and it really does come back to that sense of purpose. I think you're absolutely right. It's like once we get clear on our purpose, then whether the direction is clear or not, we can tend to at least get some momentum going in the right way. And I feel like that probably was a difference maker for you versus others, as it was for me, because a lot of times I think in high school I was like, or even in lower school and junior high, I was like, why am I doing this? What's the point of this? And I
Totally.
sometimes I still question, like, looking at a lot of the stuff that we studied, I don't feel like it applies to normal day life. I didn't learn about mortgages. I didn't learn about so many different things that now I need to know as an adult, and I just learned them because I had to, right?
Right.
So I think our educational systems are somewhat outdated at times. There's a lot that needs to be kind of changed and improved, but that's going off on a different whole topic. But you mentioned in some of the bullet points for talking points, like adopting what you call like a proactive mindset.
Yeah.
What does that mean now that we're kind of talking about mindset?
Yeah. I mean, I think you and I have spoken a little bit about this. I think it's the difference between being active and being passive.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like life is so fast paced and ever changing. And it's very easy to be caught in a rut of being passive, just
Mm-hmm.
taking life in as it comes to you. What I like to tell folks, especially, men in our situation and young people as well, is that the more you can adopt a proactive mindset, the better you are at handling stress, handling things like depression, loneliness, lack of meaning or purpose,
Yep.
because you are actively engaging in life, right? I think that's big reasons why I do things like train for Ironmans, or I challenge myself immensely, because I don't like the passive way of living. I never have. I think that was my biggest frustration when I was a young person, was
Yeah.
not having the ability to be active. I felt like I knew that I wanted to be active, but because, when you're young, you don't have any resources of your own.
Yeah.
You still have society and your parents kind of telling you how to be as a person. You almost have to be passive. You almost have to just take that and be like, okay, right. So now I realize that I have full autonomy in a sense. So I have the ability to adopt a proactive mindset, and I like to do that in everything I do. In fact, sometimes it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because I think too far ahead, and I think about too many scenarios that never end up happening.
Right.
So, like, sometimes if you ever talk to anyone who knows me well, they might say that this guy is preparing for something crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I just think that's just how my mind works. I don't actually think that low probability situations will happen, but I just like to really take a look at the entirety of the situation,
Mm-hmm.
hence being proactive.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like some of that proactiveness what's it based in? Is it based in just wanting to be prepared? Is it based in a sense of like the floor could fall out from underneath you at any point? Is it a sense of wanting to protect your loved ones? What do you feel like it's founded in?
Mm. That's an interesting question. I'm not sure anyone's ever asked me that directly, but if I were to say off the top of my head what it's based off of with some sort of certainty, I think it's the notion of, like you said, always being prepared. Um, I mean, I'm sure you've been caught off guard,
Sure.
right?
Plenty.
Every one of us has been caught off guard. And that feeling is like that sinking gut feeling that you wish could just go away, or the notion of like, why didn't I see this coming? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, I can think of situations where I've been caught off guard, and then I'm reflecting, all of the situations leading up to that moment. And then you kind of get that aha moment, like, oh my gosh, like there was no other outcome
Yeah.
that was going to happen. So I want to minimize those things for me in the future. I like obsessively want to see things coming. And like I said, sometimes it is a detriment, because sometimes I go so far down a rabbit hole and I'm like, thinking that something is going to happen that never actually does. So there's a balance for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think, to answer your question, it's that sense of wanting to be prepared to
Sure.
meet any situation.
Right. Right. I think that, and why I ask it too, because as we're talking about mindset and entrepreneurship, you know, and preparedness, there's only so much you can do, because you don't have a crystal ball, right? To ask that question of like, oh, why didn't I see this coming? Well, and I know I've thought that myself too, right? Relationships, entrepreneurship, the economy, real estate bubble, who knows, right? There could be, oh, why
Right.
didn't I see this coming? And a lot of times it's so much easier to see things in retrospect, right? And yet, I think again, and that's why I'm a student of history, is because you can see how cycles repeat themselves, right? So you can kind of learn from years past where things are going to happen in our economy. Like we all can, I think, sense it, something's going to
Right.
shift pretty massively, it's a kind of a crazy time in the world right now. But just getting ourselves prepared as much as we can, but then learning, I think the mindset of an entrepreneur is one who's extremely resourceful. And that's my impression that I get of you, where like you're out on a ride and you have your extra maybe tube for your tire, maybe you have all, like, you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you want to be as prepared as you can, but you really can't always be prepared. And when shit happens, you have to MacGyver stuff. You have to be
Totally.
resourceful, right? And I think that's the good balance between preparing as much as you can, but then also really relying on your sense of resourcefulness, so that when shit does hit the fan, you can respond, uh, again, proactively, rather than just falling into fear and throwing up your hands and giving in, right?
Yeah.
So this,
No, I think you're right. I think that's where the nuance comes in. I feel like you have to be willing to start over, and
yeah,
you have to be willing to accept that sometimes your plan is not working.
right.
And I think for me that was the hardest lesson with this mindset.
Mhm.
I used to be frustrated when like I would plan, my entire year, for instance, A through Z, and then somewhere in the middle, JKM, it just completely pivoted and went
Yeah,
the complete opposite way. And I used to just be like, why? And now I realize that like you said, sometimes you can't prepare for everything. And in those instances, you just kind of have to relinquish control and be
yeah,
like, okay, this is my
yeah,
current situation. How do I make the best of it?
yeah. Well, and I gotta imagine too, and maybe you can speak a little bit to this in terms of your Ironman, and your races and that sort of thing. You almost just have to expect that something is not going to go according to plan. You don't
Yeah.
know what it is, right? But you
Yeah.
have to just prepare somehow, at least mentally, right? And in your experience of either training or actually doing the races, have you run into that where you certainly did not see something coming, or maybe you bonked and you ran out of calories, and or something broke on your bike? Did something happen where you can speak to where you just had to literally just make the best of a really shitty situation and keep moving forward?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I think Johnny, that's like a part of the proactive mindset is
Yeah.
like realizing those things that something is highly likely to go wrong and then
Hmm.
preparing for it. Because I feel like the default for folks is to just not think about those things, right? They're
Right.
preparing for the things that they know they can prepare for, and then they just block out of their mind anything that can go wrong. And then when it happens, they're like, "Oh crap, what do I do?"
Hmm.
So yeah, no, I mean, and then specifically for the Ironman training last year, training for the Santa Cruz half Ironman, got a kidney infection
Oh, geez.
and found out that my road bike that I bought used, had cracks in the frame. So I had
Mm.
to spend like almost as much as the bike to patch up a carbon frame. So that obviously was not in the plans.
No.
But I took it as like, hey, what's my end all goal here? My
Mhm.
goal is to do this Ironman and do it well. So I
Mhm.
have to literally take it in stride. So with the kidney infection, I just relinquished control on the fact that for an entire month I wasn't going to be able to train.
Mm.
And then I just kind of focused on making sure that my body, when it was ready, was in tip top shape. And then with the frame, I just had to be like, okay, I have to fix it because this is my tool.
Mhm. Mhm. And ask
But
yourself what you could learn, maybe it's like different bike or eating different foods or having a different type of uh process leading up to the race. Who knows? There's always things to learn, is what I'm saying, from every
yeah,
situation, right? Which I think is important.
and I think before we get off of this subject, I think one thing that's important that I learned when it comes to this is seeking the advice of experts and folks who
Mhm.
have done it already.
Mhm.
That's something that I learned very early on. Yeah, I grew up an only child, and not really with the father in the house, so I really didn't have anyone immediately to lean on. But I realized that lack thereof was so important for me to find. So anything that I do that's a audacious endeavor like this, I'm always talking to folks that have done it,
Mhm.
right? Trying to learn from them, from their experiences firsthand, to get back to the root of this, to try to prepare for things that I might not even see as a problem yet. But folks have actually experienced it as a problem.
Mhm. Mhm. I think that takes a whole great sense of humility, especially as guys, we oftentimes want to like kind of figure it out ourselves and just like
Yeah.
want to be able to have this, the pride of being able to claim it for ourselves. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in many
Like
regards,
brute force in it, you know?
yeah. But you're hitting upon something I think is hugely, hugely impactful in the sense of like the humility to ask for help, to ask for support, to ask for mentorship, coaching, guidance. It's the very things that I feel like a lot of the guys that I run into have been lacking in their lives because they didn't necessarily have a great relationship with their dad. You know, that's kind of similar to how I kind of grew up too. So it's like I didn't. It's like I wanted to pretend like I had it all together, but in actuality, I was just wearing a mask, doing
Yeah.
the imposter syndrome. It's so much easier just to say, you know what? And sometimes that just comes with maturity and growing older too. Is just like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, I don't care about my ego, my sense of pride. Let's just, who can I talk to? Who can I ask for support? Right.
Right.
So getting those people on the right bus, I think is so important for our growth and prosperity in that regard. So what ultimately brought you into the Ironman training and everything else?
It's funny we talked about not talking about this really, but the COVID pandemic, I think
Oof.
everyone was looking for something to do.
Yeah.
The ones who were fortunate, I should say, to not be affected by it early on in March of 2020.
Yeah.
So I found myself as a, young 28-year-old healthy male with a lot of energy and not having anywhere to exert it.
Yeah.
So for the first time in my life, in my adult life, I bought a bike, just being like, oh, like I'll give it a try, like everyone else, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I just like completely fell in love. I was doing like 40, 50-mile rides a month after I bought it, and I was like, this is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, wow, like what else could I do to really push myself and see what I'm capable of? And like I just started researching things and found, triathlons. And then I obviously went to the one that I thought was the most badass, which was an Ironman. And I just
Yeah.
said, okay, I'm training for one now.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's how a lot of things start with me, is just like, well, where could I achieve the most growth? Where could I push myself the most?
Mm.
And then I realized along the way that the journey is the most important thing, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Like the tip of the iceberg is definitely doing the race and finishing it, but it does not come without all of the agonizing things that goes into training. Like I mentioned, kidney affection, missing toenails, all that kind of stuff. So now, now it's like a lifestyle for me. Now I'm
Yeah.
like, I yearn for this sort of structure in my life, this
Yeah.
long-term planning, this discipline to get out of bed and
Mhm.
work out early in the morning, do some
Mhm.
swimming, and I've been able to incorporate it pretty well into my life, my business, my personal life. That it's more of an integral part of my life than it is a hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I think it's what it makes me think of and what's so common. I feel like with guys that are listening to a podcast like this or coming to the meetings that I do or that we just gravitate together. It's like it's just a growth mindset, versus other friends of mine who are like, why can't you just accept who you are and love yourself? Why do you always have to be working on yourself? I'm like, no, it's not coming from a place of insecurity. It's coming from a
Right,
place of like, I have to be working out. I just enjoy growing. Because if we're not growing, then where are we going? Right.
right.
Stagnation is still kind of like slowly going down that slippery slope. Right. So
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like you've got that growth mindset in multiple facets of your life.
No, you're right. I mean, I think I heard a quote once when I was younger: "If you're not growing, you're dying." I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're alluding to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you're dead, you can't live.
Right.
So, I take that at face value. So I always need to feel like I'm growing. And I feel like same for you.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point though, again, it's the masculine I think often focuses on like, oh, once I finish that first Ironman, and once I finish that 100th Ironman, it would like then I will have felt like I'm really achieved something. And yet, to what you were saying, it's like this has really come with the humility of I think growing. I would say growing older, but I don't know if it really comes with age because I know plenty of older people who don't have this mindset. It's just it really is about the person you become along the way, right? So really about that journey versus the destination because it's so
Yeah.
fun. I mean, it's so fun to, especially out here in Colorado, so beautiful. The sunset rides is like, man,
Yeah.
you're in the moment, you're presently in the moment versus thinking like, oh, I gotta get so many calories burned, or I have to start getting certain miles done so I can show it off on Strava. It's like, what's the point of that? Like,
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
enjoy this ride.
That's that is very empty. I feel like if you're
Yeah.
motivated by things like data or just simply numbers in a
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
I'll tell you one thing, it's so funny. Leading up to my first race, I was like, okay, I need to do this training without any headphones. Just like, do 50-mile rides, 10-mile runs with nothing.
Hmm.
And that was, daunting in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, it was like one long meditation. And I remember
Hmm.
I did like a long bike ride followed by a long run. And I'm doing this run and I'm looking around at all these other folks who I would assume had fresh legs. And I'm running and I had this like realization that no one cares that I just did like 50 miles on a bike,
Yeah.
right? And I'm just
Yeah.
like, what am I looking for? Like if I was doing this
Mm.
for the validation of other people, I am lost. Like there was no way that I was ever going to get any sort of validation on the fact
Mm.
that I am like on mile 60 right now
Hmm.
and 10 of those is running. So that clicked. I'm like, oh, it's because I'm doing this for something greater,
Mm.
for my growth,
Hmm.
for learning about myself and looking within as to what I can do and what I'm capable as a human being.
Hmm.
And I just got to share that story because you're right. Like, when you're motivated by those, I call them earthly things, those surface level things, you
Hmm.
quickly realize that that's not enough to really take you to the next level. You need to be
Totally.
motivated by something much deeper and much
Yeah.
greater than that.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about again before we started recording that, like, man, and that's kind of why I've been turned off from social media for so long, is because I felt like my motivation behind that was significance based. And I didn't like how I was showing up in that regard. I enjoy sharing stuff on social media now just because I love the process of continuing to fall in love with my life. And I want to share it with people, and if people say,
Right.
oh, I want to do that, or I want to join you next time, or, I'm like, absolutely, and there's a big part of it for me that I'm a quality time type of person. So I like to
Mm,
share my time, even if I'm by myself, so it's one way for me to connect with other people when I'm actually by myself. Um, and I don't mind that alone time, but I feel like when you're running, you're on the road, or you're cycling, there's a lot of alone time. And I think a lot of times people are scared of their own thoughts, scared of the silence. I'm oftentimes thinking, or I have my AirPods in, constantly listening to something. Sometimes that quiet time, like you said, one long meditation is exactly what we need, but it's oftentimes the thing that we're most scared of.
yeah, no, I think you're right. I think what's scary sometimes is the truth.
Mm.
And I think intuition is the greatest form of it. So you could only tap into your deepest intuition by being
Yeah.
alone with yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and I just say take the plunge because it's scary, but it's more scary to not know who you really are.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Well, as we're talking about the truth, and maybe you can expand on just kind of your feelings around truth, authenticity. Um, yes, we've been talking about mindset, which I think ties all into lifestyle and entrepreneurship and relationships. There's so many things that hopefully guys are taking out of this conversation. But yeah, what's your thoughts on truth in general, and transparency, authenticity?
Yeah. So I think, you know, simply the truth has become one of the most important things for me in
Mm.
my life.
Mm.
Um, I realized early on that everything that we were taught to believe has a caveat, right?
Hmm.
I think we might have talked about this at coffee that we didn't choose any of this. I think there was someone out there that chose, I think, this life for us. I do believe in God, so I believe that there is a higher power that is guiding everything.
Hmm.
But everything on the surface on Earth, for the most part, I feel like can be reduced to human constructs. Can sometimes be reduced to being arbitrary in nature.
Hmm.
And especially when you have folks who are so bought into a sort of process or structure, holding it to be the higher truth, you realize like, that is simply a house of cards. So I feel like one of my greatest pursuits in life is to be as close to the objective truth as possible, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
that is truth without me, outside of any one of us. And I think a means to do that is to be authentic. I feel like authenticity is your greatest currency as a person, as an entrepreneur, as a partner, as a friend. And I feel like authenticity in of itself is another one of those universal truths, objective in nature, that we can tell when someone is being authentic and when someone is not. And if you are someone who isn't fully living up to your own truth or authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to quickly be discovered, I feel like, in the long run by people, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And not just because they're going to discover you, because I feel like if you're that type of person, you're going to quickly be frustrated about yourself and your own life because you're not living in your own truth. And eventually, I think that kind of manifests in things like frustration and anger and zero sum mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think to really loop it back, the best thing that you can do in life, especially, to your audience, to, the folks that, how we got connected to, who we're speaking with as a man, is be authentic. And a lot of times that means being okay with being sad, or opening up about your vulnerabilities. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned earlier, realizing that, this is a mask that society has told me that I need to put on. And authenticity is the opposite of that. Authenticity is being who you are
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of people aren't going to like it. There's a lot of folks, I think, that are apprehensive to the truth and authenticity, but I think that should not dissuade anyone from pursuing that.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I feel like where my mind goes when you're saying that is, a lot of that, at least for me, and I know other guys resonate with how I was raised. Is we were kind of taught to be inauthentic. That love oftentimes was shown conditionally. As long as you check the boxes or you act a certain way, and you stay within this box as a little boy, then you'll get love. And I think our identity and our sense of wanting to be seen and loved to some extent is what drives a lot of us, even in today's society. I think most people are driven by the desire to feel of worth, to see that they're significant, right? And to be certain that they're not going to be in too much pain, right?
Right.
But that works in the exact opposite, where like as soon as I started kind of stepping into the men's space and I start putting ads out, then I start getting all these hate comments by other men who think what the stuff I'm doing with men is total bullshit. And and at first it hurt my feelings, but it was so good because it pushed me to like, do I really ultimately care, right?
Right.
And so I think it comes back around full circle to what you're saying at the very beginning, which is like, man, when you get clear on your purpose, you almost don't fucking care what
Right.
anyone thinks, right? It really only matters what you care about. It doesn't matter if they've known that you've ridden 50 miles before these next 10 that you're running. Like, it doesn't matter. And I think it's
Right.
interesting. It's a very humbling thought. And I've thought about this too, where like, no one really cares that much about me, other than me. And if that's the case, then fucking do whatever makes me happy. That's what we were talking about again before we started recording. It's like, that's why our 2022 is going to really be focused on me and my needs, what makes me happy. And if that means getting out and riding with you a couple times a week and not working, I can't imagine a better year to look back upon, honestly, to have conversations or to go for rides or hikes, or rather than what I often have been doing, which is sitting behind a computer working. I
Yeah.
think that allows me to be a lot more present, right? Which is, to me, is hard to tackle, or I should say tackle, to really dive into the truth and to be authentic if you're not present. They all have
Right.
to kind of work with each other, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think if you reduce life, we really only have this moment, the
Yeah,
present moment,
right.
which originates in our mind, originates in consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
The future is just a thought arising in your mind, and the
Mm-hmm.
past is also just a thought arising in your mind that you're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing in this present moment. So you're absolutely right. Without being present, I don't think you could be fully in the truth
Mm-hmm.
or fully in love. And I do think, I might have mentioned this, I think love and the truth are synonymous.
100%. 100%. I agreed.
But I think through truth is where you can get absolute love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 100%. That's kind of how I was raised, is like kind of the 7 synonyms of God, which include truth and love and spirit and principle and mind, that they're all synonymous with God, and God is love. So for me,
Yeah.
it all comes back to love. That's kind of what we're all here ultimately wanting, right? We all seek it, and we think, oh, if I can become famous, or if I can become successful, or have enough money, then I'll get love. And I think that's why I think meditation is so powerful too, is that you can experience whatever it is that you want to experience right here in this moment, when you get really present to how much you have to be grateful, you could be grateful for, how much love of others, and that others love you. Man, you can tap into that and be a lot happier than we are. And I feel like that is a key to a lot of guys' success, or lack thereof, if they're not tapping into that, if they're so focused on depressive thoughts that are really more about scarcity mindsets versus this, like, the truth that we have so much to be grateful for.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
It's in the comparison that we kind of lose sight of what we have currently in this moment. So I actually recorded a podcast just recently talking about something I heard, where what guy was talking about, what made Michael Jordan so powerful was not that he was the most athletic person on the basketball court, because they're all athletic in the NBA, right? But that it
Right.
was his power to being present. He was
Mm.
so focused on this present moment, and what he could do to elevate his game, no pun intended, was what made him, one of the goats, if not the goat of the NBA,
Definitely.
right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I think Tom Brady has a lot of that too. It's just like seizing the moment, and not focusing so much on what could happen in the future if you don't seize this moment. Just be in the moment and do your thing. And I think so
Yeah.
many men could learn just how powerful that present moment could be, in terms of like, that is truth, and seeing how that affects their business, their relationship, their health, their spirituality. I don't know. I digress, but I feel like it's a pretty powerful thing that you've been hitting upon.
No, I think you're right. I think one thing that has helped me a lot is definitely learning from these greats.
Mm,
Like I've watched The Last Dance. I've seen a lot of Tom Brady,
mm-hmm,
documentaries, and
mm-hmm.
even extends further into reading ancient history. You mentioned you're a student in history. I love reading biographies
Yeah.
of great people. And one thing that I think you're touching on that I find in common is that they are so focused on their trait, on their objective, right? On their core competency, or whatever you want to call it, that there was no other explanation as to why they became the way that they did, was
Mm,
because, like you said, they they almost had tunnel vision in a sense, right? Like
mm,
this is the only thing that matters for them, and they do that time and time again, right? Like, just thinking about Michael Jordan, The Last Dance,
yeah.
I feel like he says that firsthand, that when he stepped on the basketball court, that was it.
Mm,
In that moment, he was there to play basketball,
yeah.
not
Yeah.
to think about endorsements or think about another championship, though that motivated him a lot. But it was to be the best basketball player that he could ever be in that moment. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that goes the same for all of us if we just take it day by day that way.
Mm. Yeah, I really see that, and I feel like sometimes social media can challenge, those of us who are obviously living right now, in the sense of like, it's very easy to fall susceptible to focusing on something other than the present moment, which is like,
Yeah.
how am I going to look, what are people going to think of me, and we get into that bullshit, and we lose that connection with truth, with the present moment, and that
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
affects performance in many different areas of our life, so I think it's good to have a practice like you have, which is running, swimming, working out, anything that I feel like connects with a man's sense of masculinity, where they can go into that zone and put on the blinders, you know, and connect with themselves about, what am I really doing this for, you know?
Right.
Because
Right.
I think
Exactly.
that'll really spill over into other areas of our lives and our existence as men, because our time here on this planet is so short lived, it's a blip, and so we got to do the most with what we've got, right? So
Yeah, no, I mean, I think on that note, I would like to make one comment that
yeah,
I found to work well for me,
yeah,
and it's the difference between competition and comparison.
Mm.
As males, you were touching on, really focusing on these athletic things that keep us active. And it's not just exclusive to males, but just like this
Mm-hmm.
masculine energy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like to think of competition as I'm only competing with two people, the person I used to be
Mm-hmm.
and the man that I want to become.
Mm-hmm.
But I think comparison is fair game. I'm okay comparing myself to other folks because that's where I find reference points, right?
Mm.
But it's when you convolute the two that you become problematic. When you think that you are comparing yourself and competing with someone else, whether
Mm.
that's someone in your family, whether that's a coworker,
Mm.
whether that's a business partner, whether that's someone else in your industry, right? No, you're not competing with them. You're competing simply with yourself. But you can compare, right? Because you need to know where you stand in
Mm-hmm.
relationship to others.
Mm-hmm.
If you see that someone else is quote unquote doing better than you in whatever it is that they're doing, it's not that they're out competing you. It's just that maybe they're on their own timeline. You're on yours as well,
Mm-hmm.
and you will get there. And for me, when I see folks who are very successful, and I think this goes to mentorship and asking for advice, it's I see them as folks that I would like to be. I see them as examples of what can be done.
Yeah.
I can also do that. I just have to learn from it. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a distinction there that's helped,
I think it's
comparison and competition.
powerful. Yeah, I love that. I really, really do. And I think it's you're right. I mean, I feel like a lot of what we do, and a lot of honestly, what I'm driven by is that I want to be a inspiration. Again, knock on wood, ultimately for some future children of mine, right? I want to
Yeah.
be a springboard so they can be an even better version, of human being than I am, right? I think that's the best legacy that you can ultimately leave, on this planet. So I think it's pretty cool. And in wrapping things up, what's your focus on now that we're in a new year, 2022? What's some of your big, hairy, audacious goals, if you have any, for this year? What do you want to accomplish?
Yeah. Good question. So, I mean, I think just think on the surface what we talked about, competing in my first full Ironman. So I
Mm-hmm.
have 3 on the books,
It's crazy.
2 halves, first one in April, and then
Mm.
the big one in November.
Mm.
So training pretty hard this year. Also enjoying it. I'm doing a
Yeah.
cross state bike ride in July.
Wow. Across the state of
Um,
Colorado.
yeah.
That's crazy.
I'm starting in Raton, New Mexico, and
Yeah.
ending in Cheyenne, Wyoming. It's like 400 miles, doable over 3 days.
Damn. Wow. That's crazy.
If you'd like to join, I would love to have some company. It's going to be
Yeah.
a long haul.
Yeah. I'll be happy to jump in the car and drive next to you. 100%.
Maybe for a leg,
Yeah. Yeah.
Denver to
Exactly.
Cheyenne is only like 120 miles.
Yeah. It's all uphill, right? I mean, you're just going north. So it's got to be just
Yeah, it's
constant.
got to be all uphill.
It's
Yeah.
all uphill. Yeah. That sounds brutal.
Beautiful scenery though.
Yeah. Yes. That's the truth. So you go from New Mexico all the way up. It's back roads? Is it gravel roads? Or are you going up? What's the route?
I think this is where the gravel bike is vital
Yeah.
because I don't know. It's going to be a mixture. I feel like
Okay. Cool.
I have the route mapped in Strava, but it
Yeah.
doesn't tell you exactly what you're in for.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So gravel bikes with
Cool.
with tubeless tires so you don't
Yeah.
get flat.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the works.
Oh, that's so cool. That'd be a blast. I would love to join you for some of that for sure. And then what else? You've got the Ironman, and then beyond that, business or you know.
Yeah. I think a big focus is definitely scaling the software.
Yeah.
There's about 8,000 charter schools across the country,
Yeah.
and it would be fantastic if we can get 1% of them. So 80 schools by the end of this year, I
Mm.
think, is a pretty audacious goal. But I think it would get us in the right direction of serving these children that need it the most and helping
Mhm.
these school operators focus on what matters.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, if I can do anything to help you, my sister owns a school, has started up a school. She's in her 5th year, and um, I definitely know she knows a lot of people on the whole education side of things too. So if I can
Oh,
be of
great.
any help, I'd love to help you hit that goal. So awesome, man. Well, people want to get in touch with you if they want to follow along with you. Where can they find you? And follow your Ironman
Yeah.
journey.
So I mean, like all of us, I feel like I'm across everywhere on the webs.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, obviously, for professional reasons, and where I am mostly active, Ironman related stuff, is on Instagram. And I think I put my handles, in the spreadsheet. So
you got it. I'll put it in the show notes for sure. But Uriel, appreciate you,
great, you got it.
Man. Hey, man, I'm working on it. Thank you, brother, so much for hanging with me, and for the viewers and listeners. This has been so much fun. I know we'll do it again sometime soon, and we'll get on the bike here in the next couple of days once my bike arrives tomorrow. So
of course,
it'll be a good time, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you, and getting a chance to speak to your listeners.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome, you guys. Well, feel free to check out Uriel Berrum on Instagram and LinkedIn. Follow his journeys. Maybe you'll see a little cameo of me here and there, giving him water, giving him some energy bars, driving up next to him, whatever, from the sag wagon. But thank you, brother. Thanks so much for being here, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Feel free to check out the next one on the Becoming Kings podcast. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
Thanks.